Hello, world geography students. It's me, Mr. Everton, in my basement with my coffee. And this is going to be our first real lesson that we do in distance learning. Each week, you'll get three lessons, three pieces of content. So, this is really the only lesson you're getting this week. The other two pieces of content were a video from Dr. Irizarry and a video from me. And now this will be the third one. And this is going to be a screencast of me doing a little review lecture and then a Google form that asks you to apply those ideas. Today, we're going to be talking about economic factors that can determine a country's level of development. And maybe we can also help to explain some current events. You remember these posters? Probably. Maybe some of you do. I have these four posters hanging up in the room, and they all are about specific broad themes. Specific broad themes. They're about broad themes in geography, and we're going to focus on this one right here. We'll talk about social, political, natural in later videos, but today we're going to begin reviewing some economic aspects of geography. So let's start off by talking about wealth and poverty, wealth or poverty. When we talk about wealth, when you think of a rich person and you think about them being wealthy, we're not just talking about their income, right? We're not just talking about their salary, the money that they make. We're also talking about the things that they own or their assets. When a person has enough money that they are making more money than they need any given week, right? Like they've got their place where they live and they've got their food and their clothes and they've got extra, they've got money left over. They can use that money to have a savings account or they can invest it in buying a house. And those things become assets. So when we talk about personal wealth, like something that a person has, we're talking about the money that they take in, right? But we're also talking about the things that they own or their assets, and that's personal wealth. When we talk about corporate wealth, the wealth of a business or a corporation, we're talking about something different. In this country, a lot of times, one of the assets that people will have when they become wealthy is they'll invest their money in the stock market. They'll invest their money in shares of stock. They'll own little pieces of corporations, right? So when Elon Musk came up with the idea for Tesla, he was able to make money for his company by selling shares of the company to investors. And those people make a profit when Tesla does well. And this all goes by the name Wall Street. We call it Wall Street because there's a street in New York called Wall Street where the stock market is located. And so for shorthand, a lot of times people will call the American stock market Wall Street. So when we're talking about a country's wealth, whether it's the United States or any other country around the world, usually we're measuring it in terms of gross domestic product, and we say GDP for short. I know that you remember that. This includes everything that the country makes, things that individuals make and things that corporations make, all get added up into this huge number, which is GDP. And when you look at this choropleth map here, you can see where the richest countries in the world are based on the measurement GDP per capita from 2018. Remember, GDP per capita means the country's GDP divided up by all the people in the world. We're going to talk about trade now. The United States exports things, right? It means we sell things to other countries. Our biggest agricultural export is soybeans, which you can see pictured here. We also sell planes. Boeing is a corporation that makes jets, which makes a lot of money and exports planes to other countries around the world. The largest imports that the United States brings into the country, buys from other countries, are cars, like this Nissan that you see pictured here, and oil, which we get from other countries. So we're buying things, which are imports, and we're also selling things, which are exports. Now, there's two things that, two approaches a country can take to exports and imports. One is they can have tariffs. A tariff is trying to protect the businesses inside a country, right? So if we don't want Americans to buy Japanese cars like that Nissan, we can put a tax on them, a tax on the import of Nissans into the country, and that'll make people want to buy Fords instead, which is an American car. So that's a tariff. A tariff is a tax on imports and exports. The opposite of that is free trade, which is when you get rid of tariffs and you make it cheaper to buy things from other countries and cheaper to sell things to other countries. So the United States is part of this agreement called NAFTA, or the North American Free Trade Agreement, which makes free trade possible between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And that means that we can sell things to Canada and Mexico without having to pay any tariffs, and they can sell things to us without having to pay any tariffs. And that has led to an increase in globalization, or the interconnectedness of different economies of different countries around the world. Yes, I got ahead of myself. Globalization, right? We have access to lots of things from other countries. Like when you go to the grocery store, hopefully you're not going too often right now, but when you go to the grocery store, you'll see that like the blueberries you're buying out of season are made in like Chile. And that's why we can eat blueberries in the wintertime, because we are able to import them from other countries. Another example of this, going back to that car thing, we're talking about American car companies. A lot of those American car companies, like Ford and Chrysler and GM, which you can see pictured here, are actually making their cars in Mexico, because Mexico is a less developed country than the United States is right now. So the people who live there get paid less money. So if Ford wants to set up a car company a car factory in Mexico, they can pay the workers less money than they would here in the United States. And this is profitable because of NAFTA, because there's no tariff, there's no tax on the car when it leaves Mexico and comes to the United States. So it's profitable for Ford to set up a car factory in Mexico. Another example is Nike shoes. Nike shoes are made in predominantly in factories in Vietnam. The cotton typically comes from China. The company itself, the business, is in Oregon, like Oregon in the United States. That's where the headquarters are. That's where the people who design the shoes. And then, of course, Nike shoes are sold all around the world. So this is another example of globalization. We're taking a natural resource from one country, we're putting it in factories in another country, and the people who own it all live in a third country. Okay, so this leads us to employment and economic sectors. So there's four different sectors of the economy that we've talked about in this class. One is the primary sector, like corn in the American Midwest, in Iowa and Illinois and Nebraska and all these other states. That is a natural resource, and this farmer who works with corn is part of the primary sector of the American economy. Another example is coal, right? We have lots of coal mines located in Western Pennsylvania, Western Virginia, Kentucky, Appalachia. That is a natural resource. The miners who go down in the mines and, bring up the coal are working in the primary sector of the economy. Now, the secondary sector of the economy is, making things, manufacturing things, typically in factories. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is, excuse me, used to be the United States' largest producer of steel. U.S. Steel was a company that was based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and they had steel mills, factories that make steel all over the place, but particularly in Pittsburgh. Detroit was known as the center of the automobile industry, and the three largest automotive companies in the United States, GM, Ford, and Chrysler, were all centered in Detroit, and they had factories there where people would work to make cars. The tertiary sector of the economy is the service sector. People who make a living by providing services to people, whether that's waiting on their tables in a restaurant, or helping people in hospitals when they get sick, building things in construction work, or me teaching you stuff. That's all part of the service sector of the economy. The quaternary sector is related to is similar, right? It's service jobs kind of, but it's more on the research end of things. It's more about information. It's more about design and research and inventing new ideas and coming up with ways to do things. Tends to pay better than the tertiary sector. So a post-industrial economy, which is what the United States has most of its jobs in the service sectors, the tertiary and quaternary parts of the economy. So I've been using a lot of examples from the United States. Let's just go, because that's what we did in class. case study of the United States, talking about the history of economics in the United States. When the United States industrialized, most of its factories were in the northeastern part of the country. I've already talked about Detroit and Pittsburgh. We watched a video in class about Dayton, Ohio. These are all examples of Rust Belt cities. This was the manufacturing center of the United States up until the 1980s. In the 1980s, it became less profitable for companies to run their factories in this part of the country. This part of the world, this part of the United States became known as the Rust Belt because the factories started to shut down. Competition from other factories and other places that were more profitable led these companies to close these factories. When they did that, the people who worked there became unemployed. Another thing that led to unemployment of people in those factories was automation, which is using machines to do work that people could have done. So like creating assembly lines for these cars where robots are putting the cars together. It's a lot cheaper to build a robot and maintain a robot than it is to pay a person a wage. And this meant that a lot of places in the Midwest became what we call ghost towns, abandoned towns where, there might still be some people living there, but the major economic driver of the city has left. And so there's no more good jobs available. And so people who live there have less money and the town starts to shut down. And you can see that Detroit here has the population of Detroit reached a peak in 1950. And then over time, as American cars became less profitable, as started to face competition from Japanese and German auto companies, and the factories in Detroit started to move elsewhere, the population of Detroit has been decreasing. One place where a lot of people have moved in the United States is the southern and western parts of the country, which are called the Sun Belt. And this is where the new manufacturing and service parts of the economy in the United States have developed. We're talking about cities like Atlanta, Georgia, Houston, Texas, Dallas, Texas, and Phoenix, Arizona. And these are the really thriving cities in the United States right now. These are the places where people are making lots of money. Oh, yeah. And then Silicon Valley, of course, in California. One reason why a lot of manufacturing moved to the Sun Belt was because there's no unions there. A lot of places like Virginia is what we call a right to work state, which means you can't have a union. And unions are things that help workers and help them to make more money and help them to demand higher wages. With no unions, it means that work is cheaper there, and so auto industries moved to the south so they could take advantage of that. Silicon Valley is a center of technology. It's a place where Google is located, where Facebook is located, where all these like big tech companies are centered in California. Atlanta, Georgia is a center for the banking industry. It's a place where car companies have moved to, and also biotechnology. And then Texas is the center of the American oil industry and is a place where a lot of oil companies in the United States are centered. And also they have a very profitable aerospace engineering sector of their economy as well. Phoenix, Arizona has a lot of tech companies as well, financial services, and healthcare. And here you can see the population of Phoenix, Arizona. If you look where that population was, compare it to Detroit in 1950, Phoenix's population was much lower, and it's been steadily climbing to the point where now it's one of the more robust cities in the country. So just to summarize, the United States started off with most of its economy centered in the Northeast and Midwest. And those cities eventually started to suffer as their major industries left and moved south and west and also out of the country to places in the Sun Belt. Many of those jobs also went outside the United States to places like Mexico or to South Asia like Vietnam and India and Bangladesh. And the major reason for all these changes is just the cost of labor. As America became a more developed country, The people who lived here demanded better pay so that they could participate in the economy, and it became economically advantageous, became a good idea for companies to try to find cheaper labor elsewhere. We will talk in future videos about the global economy and how the United States fits into the global economy and what what it means to be a developed country versus a developing country, which we've talked about before, but we'll review and expand. So getting to the activity part of today, when you're done watching this video, you're going to go do an activity where you're applying the information about the economic sectors. So we talked about this in the video just a few minutes ago. The primary sector with these shoes is that cotton is needed to make the shoes. The cotton is grown in China. They're manufactured, the secondary sector manufactures the shoes in Vietnam. The tertiary sector, the largest Nike store in the world, is in London. So people go to the store to buy the shoes. That's the tertiary sector. And then the quaternary sector, you can't see it totally because my head is in the way. Oh, I moved my head. The magic of technology. Oh, I'm going to move it over here. What? That's insane. The quaternary sector is in Oregon, where the CEO of Nike is headquartered. So the primary sector is the natural resources. The secondary sector is making the stuff. The tertiary sector is the service part of it, like selling, helping people find the stuff and have access to it. And then the quaternary sector is the financial side of things, the design side of things, like designing the shoe, running the company that sells the shoe. Moving my head again, you're now going to complete an activity using the Google form link on Canvas, which you will find posted there. You're going to have 4 different products that you are going to identify the economic sectors for. And so you can do as many of them as you can. Don't, I know I'm not there to like help you per se. You can send me an email. Or, if you really struggle with it, you can meet during my office hours, 1:30 to 2:30, Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. Don't be afraid to do a little bit of research if you need to learn more. Look at the ingredients on the labels and to figure out, where the primary sector is applicable. Wow, I'm getting all tongue-tied now. So t-shirt, tea, lip balm, Tabasco sauce. Yeah, don't be afraid to email me questions. You can tell I'm having a hard time letting go of the part where I would be able to help you. Okay. All right. Well, I hope that all made sense, and I will talk to you soon. I'm going to probably put up another just like touching base video without any kind of notes involved later this week because I enjoyed making that first one. I don't know if you could tell. So I might make another one later this week and post that when it is available. All right. I'll talk to you next time. And where is it?